Should buyers and sellers meet? Hey everybody, Realtors Toolbox here. I'm Realtor Rich.
I'm Michelle Haas.
Loving life with Lucy Curran.
Hey everybody, today we're talking about should buyers and sellers meet? What about it? So you've shown property, the clients have gotten into contract, they put up their earnest money deposit, and now the question comes up. Occasionally, buyers and sellers may accidentally meet each other. And is this a good thing? Do you want this to happen? Not want it to happen? It certainly couldn't be all bad if they did meet, but I think one of the things that we want to look at is you're already on an established path where your clients like the property, they made their offer, it's accepted, they're moving forward, the sellers have accepted, they've got plans, they want to get their money and do something different. And so now we're on this path moving towards closing a real estate transaction, and it's taken some effort to get there. Do we want to begin introducing variables that could change the dynamic of that path? And so I think maybe it would be good to just kind of talk a little bit, share some stories. I don't know, Michelle, you want to jump in there first and talk about this?
I got 10 stories for this topic, let me tell you. I was representing a seller. This was years ago, and the transaction was going well. Everybody was happy. My seller was moving out of state, and the buyers came in with their agent. Now, my seller every other day took his really big dog and left the house. And this day was no different. I asked him, take your really big dog and leave the house. Oh yeah, we know the routine. Well, he was getting his stuff together and his dog on the leash, and he was running a little bit behind. And the buyers and the buyer's agent came to the door, and he goes, sorry, I gotta go. I'll see you. And then the buyer said, you don't have to leave because of us. And so he stayed. And they were talking. They were having a great time. Everybody was getting along. And my seller says, I'm moving out of state. And you know what? I really haven't had enough time to pack and say goodbye to my friends. The buyer says, you can stay as long as you want. My seller says, cool, I'm gonna. So he calls me. This was later in the day. He calls me and he says, I'm staying 2 more weeks. And I'm like, you are? What? And he goes, yeah, I talked to the buyer. We're all good. I want to stay 2 more weeks. I haven't had time to really say goodbye to my friends and some family, and I got to get together with people. And he said, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I called the buyer's agent. I said, hey, you were there. What's going on here? He's going to stay 2 more weeks. And she says, 2 weeks? Well, we didn't say 2 weeks. He thought your seller meant a couple of days. Well, we had this back and forth. And then my seller actually ended up blaming the buyer's agent. He thought the buyers were cool, but it was the buyer's agent that messed this up. He ended up leaving in a couple of days after that, but it's this perception, right? It's this misunderstanding. And that's why we love to talk agent to agent, because we're going to make sure everything is clear and our emotions aren't involved, our feelings aren't involved. But yeah, you just kind of have to avoid it every time you can. So, but I think you had a different experience, right, Lucy?
Oh yeah, I mean, so I actually had an advantage, as a matter of fact, in for my buyers. So you win some, you lose some, right? And in this case, we actually won our offer because it was a showing, and the listing agent wasn't there, and their seller opened the door for my buyers and I to come through to take a second look. And the seller and my buyers got to talking. I mean, you can only catch them in certain moments, right? And then once you turn your back, because you're walking away to show them a different room or go to a different part of the house, I mean, you just don't know when the seller and the buyer are going to connect and meet and talk. And before I know it, the seller just fell in love with my buyers because they came with their family and their kids and they just bonded. And that was like a total advantage that we had in all the other offers, believe it or not, because the listing agent, was honest and told us and said, hey, out of all of the offers that came in, she chose you guys because she fell in love with your family and she wanted to make sure that your buyers that are first time home buyers with children were going to have her house. So so it really was an advantage for us, but at the same time, Rich, I would agree with what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, so I have a story. Had a client that was buying a house and they were still in the inspection period, but the home inspector had recommended a special inspection be done on the heating units in the house. It was a dual system. It was a pretty big house. And in fact, it was about 3,000 square feet, 2-story. And so when the client and I went over to meet the inspector for these heating units, the seller happened to be there. And so while we were talking, the seller, who was just being conversational and trying to be friendly, we were talking about the inspections being done on the heating unit. And there was a good reason for the additional inspection outside of the home inspection. But just in chatting, she started volunteering some issues with the house they had when the house was built. And it introduced a bunch of concern regarding mold in the house. And even though it had been many years that it had been remediated, but they had at one time, the builder had to come back out and they basically had to rip the entire front of the house off and rebuild it. And they had a water issue that created a whole lot of mold, and it was a big problem. And so it introduced a variable into the situation where the buyers started to really question whether they wanted to buy this house or not, even though that had been remediated 15 years prior when the house was built. Within the first year was when they had the issue. But the seller, in having that conversation and just chatting about the builder a little bit and sharing a few of those things, introduced some additional inspections to make sure there were no remaining mold issues, which certainly we want to protect, and we're all about full disclosure, but it was really not necessary at that time because they had mold inspections done and everything had been remediated. But this almost killed the deal, and fortunately everything worked out and the sale did go through. But I think introducing the buyers and sellers very often has nothing to do with any material fact about the property, but it just could be how the conversation goes. People sometimes are very particular. They like certain things that other people don't like. And so things that are shared in good faith, thinking that they're just being friendly and conversational, could be perceived, and offend the other party, which could cause someone to say, you know what, I would never buy this house from that person based on what I just heard them say. I mean, so that's the reason why realtors have a job, is they're protecting the financial, they have the fiduciary of the buyer and the agent representing the seller, and it's to protect all the parties involved and to handle the communications and to do this in a professional manner. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. So I think that the realtors are being paid well to be able to do that part of the job along with the rest of the things that go on in a real estate transaction. But the last thing you want is a real estate deal killed because of a misunderstanding that, the buyer had with something the seller was saying. And boy, everybody regrets it. And it really was something that was overblown and didn't need to happen, and it killed the deal. So it really sets everybody back. People that wanted the house don't like something somebody said, and so they don't get the house. The seller doesn't close and get their money to move on to buy their next house or whatever they're trying to do. And so I think you're at this point in the game, you're already on a path where you're moving down the road towards closing the sale of a house, and you're introducing variables that you don't need to introduce that can derail your transaction. So I think if you were to poll realtors across the board, they would say that it's probably not in everybody's best interest for the buyer and seller to meet.
Agreed.
And then, like we were talking about earlier before the recording of this, this video, that it's not all bad. There are nice people that are going to be able to have a good conversation, but we want to mitigate, these negatives that could happen, and not knowing these are unknown variables that could impact the transaction. And so it's probably just best to leave them out of the equation and make sure the transaction closes and the people that want the house get it and the sellers get their money and move on to their, the next stage of what they're doing for housing.
Geez, Rich, I feel like you're the realtor judge. You need one of those hammers.
I know, right? It's so weird, because you'd think people can, conduct themselves professionally in every way, but people don't intend for the wrong thing to happen or be said. And sometimes it's just how somebody else perceived it. But with all of those things being unknowns, I think it's better to leave it out. And so just kind of my opinion with my experience, I've been in the business for many years, and I've seen conversations not go well with people in different circumstances related to real estate. And so that's part of, I think, our job is to kind of keep that stuff from happening too much, if at all possible. But again, it's not all bad if they do meet and talk, and it is going to happen. And so you just need to be prepared to step in if it looks like the conversation's going the wrong direction for some reason. Find a way to disrupt that conversation. But any other comments on this one? It's an interesting topic. Should buyers and sellers meet?
That's great. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just to avoid it all, right?
Absolutely.
Just be there with your clients, and you as an agent make
Absolutely.
that clear pathway when you bring either your buyer to an empty house, or you make sure you communicate to your seller not to be at the property when the buyers are coming in. So
absolutely. And I mean, why is this topic so important to you as an agent? Because we're here to get paid as agents. And so everything that we're doing, this is about earning our commissions and doing our own due diligence and doing a good job. And so we want to make sure that you're going to get paid. So if you found this video to be helpful, I mean, subscribe below, leave comments. We love it. And we're Realtors Toolbox. Thanks for being here and watching this video, and stay tuned for more videos to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.